When you hear the name Tupac, right, you almost certainly think of the legendary rapper. But where did that name come from? Well, it was chosen for a reason, a really powerful one. It's a tribute to an 18th century revolutionary, a guy whose story, wow, it's all about rebellion, sacrifice, and one of the most brutal executions you can imagine. It's a story that's been echoing for centuries. So let's get into it. Let's uncover the story of the original Túpac Amaru. All right, to really understand this, we're actually going to start at the end. So picture this. We're in the main square of Cusco in Peru. It's May 18th, 1781, and the Spanish colonial authorities, they're about to make a statement. A really, really terrifying statement. But they're not going to use words. They're going to use a man's life. Just look at this image. It's a depiction of what went down that day. You've got a man tied to 4 different horses, and each horse is about to be driven in an opposite direction. The plan? It was to literally tear him limb from limb. And they did this in public, in front of his family, in front of this horrified crowd. I mean, this was the punishment the Spanish Empire came up with for the leader of the single biggest uprising they'd ever faced in their colonies. And get this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment battlefield savagery. No. This was written down. It was the cold, calculated, official, judicial sentence. The Spanish weren't just trying to kill a man. They wanted to erase the very idea of him. Their plan was to dismember his body and then scatter the parts all across the region as a gruesome warning to anyone else who might get a similar idea. It's just an unbelievable level of brutality, right? It leaves you with this huge question: who was this guy? And what on earth could he have done to deserve an end like that, to provoke such a furious, gruesome response from one of the most powerful empires on the planet? Okay, so to figure that out, we have to rewind. To understand the rebel, you gotta understand the man he was before all of this went down. Because here's the thing, he wasn't born a revolutionary. Far from it. He was born a nobleman, a man with status, wealth, and real power inside that same colonial system. So you've really got 2 identities for one person. On one hand, you have his birth name, José Gabriel Condorcanqui. And that name represented an elite, someone the Spanish themselves recognized. He was a rich merchant, a direct descendant of Inca royalty. But then there's the name he chose for himself, Túpac Amaru II. And that name, well, that was his transformation. That was him becoming an indigenous liberator, a powerful living symbol of resistance. And this portrait of him is so interesting, isn't it? Because it just completely shatters that typical image we have of a peasant rebel. He looks like a dignitary, an aristocrat. And that's because that's exactly what he was. This was not some downtrodden farmer rising up. This was a major figure in his community, a guy who was respected by pretty much everyone, indigenous people and the Spanish elite alike. And that's the key point here, you see. This was a man with everything to lose. I mean, think about it. He's a direct descendant of the very last Inca emperor. He got a top-notch Jesuit education, so he spoke Quechua, Spanish, and Latin. He owned a successful business with like 350 mules, and on top of all that, he was the hereditary chief, the Caraca, for several communities. So when he chose to rebel, it wasn't out of desperation. It was a choice born from principle. So again, we come back to that question. What could possibly push a man with so much privilege to risk absolutely everything? Well, the answer lies in the incredibly brutal, exploitative system that he, as a leader, had to see and even participate in every single day. And right at the heart of this whole oppressive system was something called the mita. Basically, it was a mandatory labor draft. Indigenous men were forced, against their will, to leave their homes and families to go work in just unimaginable conditions. The worst of it was in the silver mines of Potosi. For so many, being sent to the mita was a death sentence. It just completely tore communities apart.
And the mita? That was just the tip of the iceberg. On top of that, you had these crippling sales taxes, the alcabalas, on pretty much everything, making it harder and harder just to survive. Then you had these abusive local governors, the corregidores, who would force people to buy overpriced stuff they didn't even need just to push them into debt they could never escape. And if you weren't sent to the mines, there was forced labor in the textile mills too. The whole system was designed for one thing, to squeeze every last drop of wealth out, no matter the human costs.
Now, Túpac Amaru didn't just jump straight to violence. He was smart. He knew the system, and he tried to change it from the inside. He filed petitions with the local guys. He took his case up to the regional government in Cusco. He even traveled all the way to the capital, Lima, to plead his case in front of the highest courts.
He did everything by the book. And what happened? Every single time, he was ignored, totally shut down. It made him realize the system wasn't broken. It was working exactly the way the Spanish wanted it to. So, with every single legal door slammed in his face, Túpac Amaru II made his choice. If the system refused to bend, well then he would have to break it. And so, in late 1780, it began. The largest indigenous uprising in the entire history of the Spanish Americas. And once it kicked off, man, things move fast. First, he captures and executes the governor, this really abusive guy named Arriaga, right in public. Just 12 days after that, he issues this incredible proclamation, abolishing slavery in the region. That was huge for the time. Then, his forces score a major victory at the Battle of Sangarara, and suddenly his army explodes to tens of thousands of people. But the momentum didn't last. They failed to capture the big prize, the fortified city of Cusco, and that was really the turning point. A few months later, betrayed by some of his own men, he was captured. But it is so important to understand Túpac Amaru was not fighting this war alone. Not by a long shot. A huge part of this story, one that gets overlooked way too often, is the central role women played. His wife, Micaela Bastidas, was an absolute powerhouse. She wasn't just helping out. She was a commander, a strategist. She ran logistics, supplies, intelligence. People say she was the one pushing him to attack Cusco when it was vulnerable, a move that could have changed the entire outcome. And get this, out of 73 of the main rebel leaders, 32 of them were women, almost half. That's an incredible detail that you just don't hear enough about.
So after they caught him, the Spanish tortured him, trying to get him to give up the names of his allies. And his response, it's become legendary. He supposedly said, "There are no accomplices here other than you and I. You as oppressor and I as liberator. We both deserve to die." I mean, wow. Even at the very end, facing certain death, he refused to break. He just cemented that identity, the liberator.
The Spanish thought that by literally tearing his body apart, they could kill the movement he started. Well, they were dead wrong. Sure, they killed the man. But in doing so, they created a legend that would inspire resistance for centuries.
Yeah, the idea of Túpac Amaru turned out to be unkillable. The rebellion didn't just stop, it kept going for 2 more years under his cousin. His name became this rallying cry for independence all over South America. And this is crazy. Centuries later, in the 1960s and 70s, you had revolutionary groups like the Tupamaros in Uruguay and the MRTA in Peru still using his name. He even became an official national symbol in Peru. His legacy just kept growing. And that, of course, brings us full circle. On one side, you see the monument in Cusco to the original rebel, and on the other, the artist who made that name famous all over the world. Tupac Shakur's mom was a Black Panther, and she named her son after Túpac Amaru II because he was this powerful symbol of resistance against oppression. Just think about that. That legacy jumped across continents and across centuries. So when you look at that statue today, it's not a monument to a failed rebel. Not at all. It stands as this powerful symbol for independence, for justice, and for just refusing to be silenced. It's the ultimate irony, isn't it? The Spanish tried so hard to erase him, and all they did was make sure he'd be remembered forever. And that leaves us with this incredible paradox at the heart of his story. Túpac Amaru II, he lost. He lost his fight, his family, his own life in the most horrible way you can think of. By any military standard, his rebellion failed. And yet, his name is now a global icon. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How does a rebellion that was so brutally crushed become one of history's most powerful and timeless symbols for justice?